Hello and welcome to this commentary of the first series of Lego Doctor Who I made. So this will be fun. I just decided I wasn't quite depressed enough tonight, so I'm going to watch half an hour's worth of stuff I made when I was 12. So yeah, I'm going to try and just treat it as that, as like this is the stuff I made when I was 12, so kind of treat it as, you know, a 12-year-old kid made this, as opposed to, oh wow, these are going to be absolutely brilliant works of art. So I'm going to, I'm not going to try and go too overboard with it, like, oh my god, I can't believe I did this, that's absolutely insane, why would you do that, you should do it differently, because that's just kind of a moot point, I think, because I was 12. Oh boy, this is going to be fun. Well, anyway, you guys can share some of my misery. So let's start episode 1 now. I should probably say as well, I've not watched these for years and years and years, so the biggest thing for me that's going to really bloomin' annoy me is just how high-pitched everyone's voices are, because that's the one thing that you can't work around. You can see obviously all straight away. There's the very basic sets, very basic animation, but I can kind of overlook that. It's just the voices that just you take it down just that extra notch. But I don't know. You can see as well this is lovely 4:3 aspect ratio, which was of course a very deliberate design choice to try and emulate the classic series. Apart from the titles, which are in 16:9. I've already gone back on myself. I said I was going to try and treat it like this is just the work of a kid and shouldn't be taken too seriously, but I've already done that. I've already started complaining. Oh dear. It's half an hour as well, man. But part of the problem is some of the plot points in Series 1 and Series 2, I guess, do come back up in Point of No Return, which I can't stress enough was also written when I was... God, when was that written? Alex and I, LFP Animations, we wrote the first draft. I think possibly... I can't remember, but we might have written it before the multi-story. I can't remember. It was either before or it was around that sort of time. So, it must have been around before then, because it was originally, Point of No Return was originally going to be for the 50th anniversary in 2013, and of course that never happened. And the Multi-Doctor story came out in 2014, I believe. So yeah, it's an old script, is what I'm saying, and so I can't stress this enough. Is in the run-up to it, please don't expect wonders. It's all right. I'm fairly pleased with it, but just keep your expectations in check. Anyway, I'm going way off point here. We're already like 2 minutes into this thrilling episode. I've not really said anything about it yet, because I don't really have a whole lot to say, to be honest. I don't know. I thought it was, in hindsight, obviously I'm trying to remember as well, man, because this was 2011, so that is 8 years ago I made this. I can't remember much of the process that went into it, if any process went into it. But just looking at the set there, obviously there is elements that come into play later. I don't know if that's just because they're sets I had around, like the little Atlantis jet ski thing there in the background. That obviously comes in later in the series. So I don't know if this is me being forward thinking. I think I was a little bit, because there was a shot where Seth looks at the helmet that he ends up wearing. So I think that, oh boy, those effects are beautiful. I mean, to be honest, for the time, and I'm trying to remember as well the other stuff I made around this time, because this was shot just using a USB webcam, but it was shot on iStop Motion. So this must have been one of the earliest things I did using frame capture software. So it's the animation itself is a little bit nicer than the stuff of that sort of time for me, I think. Like the cameras, still, there isn't too much light flicker. Anyway, what I was going to say was I think in retrospect, it's actually not a bad. It's an interesting idea. I think that the first episode of the series has one Doctor, and obviously the Matt Smith Doctor, and then the rest of the series is another Doctor. So it's kind of a little bit like the TV movie in that sense, and then it starts with one and moves into another. I think that's actually quite interesting in retrospect. Obviously, the episode itself doesn't have too much meat on its bones, but whatever. And I think, this was the most forced companion introduction ever, possibly. Again, I'm just going back on myself here. I think I tried to retcon a little bit of this later on, I think. But I can't really remember. Because it is just so forced. It's kind of like... I mean, this was, as well, you've got to understand, I didn't fully appreciate the characterisation of the Doctor at this time. And so there's a lot more action in this series than there is in the actual show, and obviously the Doctor spends a lot of his time with soldiers, some of which is retconned in Point of No Return, in that, he's kind of like a weak character, this incarnation of the Doctor. He doesn't know what to do, and that is a theme of Point of No Return. It's something I'd want to explore more in another episode if I ever write one, but just looking at this now, actually, I should probably make the point that episode 2 isn't in this commentary, because there is no existing file of it anyway. So this is the only footage of episode 2 of this series that actually exists. So just looking at it now, trying to remember what the plot is so I can try and surmise it for you a little bit. I think in episode 2, I think it was just called Gungonia Fortress, and it was introducing Gungonia Fortress, obviously, which is a very key location, not only in Series 1 but also Series 2, that the Doctor and Seth and company revisit quite frequently. And essentially the episode was, I believe, they arrive, there's a Indiana Jones type character, an explorer who you kind of saw in the trailer there, who later appears in episode 5 of this series. And there's some guy there who is a defender of the fortress, and they go back in time and they realise that it was built by aliens, and that's kind of it from memory. Obviously there was a bit more to it, there must have been, but that was the episode as far as I remember it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else obviously noteworthy to say about it, but when it appears later in the series, it is just a location. The backstory of it isn't important, especially in Series 2, where it is just there as a set piece. So you're not missing very much by episode 2 not being here. Interestingly, it was, I think, must have been one of the first copyright strikes the channel ever got, and it was an outright strike as well, so I deleted it, and then obviously went through various computer upgrades. I've just lost the original file. So the only reason these 5 episodes that I have today still exist is because I YouTube to MP3'd them before I took them down, thankfully. And obviously they're not on the channel anymore, which is another thing I did want to say, and should probably have said at the start, was this is part of the reason for doing this particular commentary, because, as I say, some plot points are important to Point of No Return. So I was kind of like, the episodes are available on Vimeo, and I'll link them in the description if you do want to see them, but I thought it might be, there isn't that much plot to it, so if you just kind of sit here and watch them with me, then you get the picture. Anyway, here's episode 3. This was God, I'm trying to remember anything about episode 3. Episode 3 introduces Tano, which is another semi-important character, particularly for this series, less so in Series 2. But yeah, same sets, same white brick walls, so you can't really tell that you've changed location at all. This was back when that was like those were the only bricks I had, so I couldn't build extensive sets or anything. It was just literally walls and corridors, which is a bit of a shame, but again, and I keep going back on this, it was just the resources I had at the time. So, I think I did a fairly good job with what I had, in retrospect. there's loads of things you would do differently. And it was an idea that I floated for a time after Series 2 was just remaking Series 1. But I feel like, now just going back and doing the old stuff again doesn't really add anything new, especially when I still have ideas for new stuff. That was kind of a cool shot, actually, that vertical shot. I've not really done any vertical shots since, because part of the good thing with the USB camera I had there, which was it was either the Hue HD webcam. Yes, it was the Hue HD webcam, and the camera I used in Series 2, which was the IPVO point-to-view camera, both webcams. They had these really versatile stands, so I could get those nice vertical shots. Obviously now I'm using a DSLR, and I don't use a tripod with it because it's just too finicky to get into the set. So I've not really done anything like that. I've done a lot more interesting stuff in terms of cinematography since. As an example of a track-in, I didn't think I did any camera moves, because the very first time I remember properly rigging a camera move was, I think, the Captain America Winter Soldier parody that we did in 2014, so obviously a bit after this. And I rigged that, I made a rig out of Lego tiles and plates, which I still use today for any camera moves I do, because it just works. But I didn't think I did any camera moves before. Obviously, it was very rudimentary, but I just assumed I didn't. Oh god, that acting. I'm kind of tuning a lot of this out because I'm just talking over it, and the volume is so low at the moment. So I don't know how much of this you're actually getting in terms of the episode. I'm certainly not getting a lot from it. Yeah. So the Dalek obviously was the main antagonist of the series, kind of overloomed the whole thing, which I think is actually it's another interesting idea, just having the one Dalek. Obviously been done in Series 1 and more recently in Resolution, and I think it's probably the better way of doing Daleks, especially compared to Point of No Return, where there's just armies and armies of them. But again, it kind of, obviously later in the series, when he teams up with the Cybermen and makes a bunch of hybrids, kind of makes a moot point. There you go, there's the alliance being made. I don't know, man. It's just, it's difficult because there isn't enough plot to talk about, I don't think, because it is just, it's very surface level, because this is before I kind of had a better understanding of some of the themes of the show and how to actually write action and stuff like that, how to shoot action as well, which is a big thing, because obviously, with this scene in particular, this big climax scene of this episode, in my head I had a very different idea of how it was going to go, which I think I could pull off now. But kind of in this same vein, like the shootout was kind of similar, it's just the way the limitations of my animation and my cinematography at the time meant that obviously it didn't really work. I mean, you can tell what I was trying to go for a little bit, and as well the set doesn't help as well. Like there you see the guy shooting at the Doctor, and then the Doctor just hides behind the wall again, but the Doctor's still obviously in plain sight. One thing I haven't advanced in all this time is my bloody laser effects. It's still just the same principle. In everything I've done since is just like a bit of colour. And then there it's like shoots him from the ground, but why did he jump onto the tripod to... I don't know. And obviously character design, things like that. Just using the Alien Conquest. Oh, there is a hallmark of any early Lego Doctor Who video, is when you do the TARDIS effect, the set bounces. It will always bounce. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the Alien Conquest figures, obviously no modification to them, just bare bones. It's tricky, because I keep reiterating, this is the work of a 12-year-old, you have to kind of appreciate it for that. And it's not to say there aren't good elements in it, at least retrospectively looking at it, I'm identifying stuff that was kind of there on a surface level, and I think I could extrapolate and do a better job of today. But, it just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. And it's kind of still not there. Of course, I can't stress enough that when you make films of any kind, be it animation or live action or anything, it's always a learning curve. You're never a finished product. You always have something else to learn with it. And I think, looking back on it now, on these episodes, it's a prime example of that, because Point of No Return is such a progression from it. Like, you watching them back to back, as I'm sure some people will, because I'm uploading these in a couple of days before I'm planning on releasing Point of No Return. So just looking at these now and then looking at the new stuff, like, you wouldn't think it was, at least in terms of how it's shot and things, you wouldn't even think it was from the same person. It's just that different. So I think it's a good example to say this is how you can evolve, and you shouldn't stop trying. You should just keep going with it, and eventually, if you stick with it long enough, you can get better at it. And this isn't to say that what I'm doing now is especially good. I like to think it's better than this, and I'm quite proud of some of the stuff I have achieved with Point of No Return from a technical perspective. But there's always more stuff you can learn, and I'm sure in a few years when I look back on Point of No Return, I'm going to think, why didn't I do so many things differently? And it's the exact same with this. You can look at this all day long and think, wow, look at the intro sequence there, for example. Why didn't I add more keyframes? Why didn't I green screen the TARDIS properly? Why didn't I build a better looking TARDIS? It's just a blue square with some handwritten notes on it. Why didn't I get the aspect ratios right? But you learn these things over time. You can't just expect to be a finished article. So hopefully you can take something away from this, which is to, even if you are just starting, and this goes for anything, filmmaking is an obvious example because it's what I know, but it goes for any skill, any hobby, any craft, is you are never ever going to be good at it when you start. And it's frustrating. I know it's frustrating, especially as we get older. I'm going to be 20 soon, which is mental. But as we get older, obviously you get more fixed into what you know. I've stuck with animation long enough, and I started early enough to the point where I can say, I'm actually not terrible at this. I've done the learning curve, I've done the development. It's been a long process. This was 9 years ago, man, and I was doing stuff even before then. I've been animating literally for over half my life. So, I can say I've put in the time. And it's frustrating whenever I try anything new. Like, live action, to take an example, is something that I'm starting to do more and more of. And I'm getting better at it, but I hadn't put the time in. I didn't do any live action really throughout any of my earlier teenage years, sort of pre-17. I didn't do any of it. And so I've only got about 3 or 4 years experience with live action. So I'm getting there, but I'm nowhere near where I could be and potentially will be in a few years if I keep at it. 3D animation is another example, something I wanted to say, in that I've never really tried 3D animation. It's something that I'd quite like to try, but I wouldn't know where to start. If I'd have started when I was younger, I'd have put the time in, and by now, but you could say that about anything. It's like learning any skill, you have to put in the time. Anyway, I'm getting very, very much off topic there. But again, I think that's probably a more interesting conversation than anything I would have to say about this schlock. I feel like I might have actually imparted, unintentionally, some actual wisdom there. So hopefully you guys can take something away from it. Again, it's... this is the part in retrospect that obviously doesn't make any sense, is the Dalek making alliances. That's something that kind of trying to put myself into my younger headspace, I think it was kind of like you see the finales, the series finales are kind of like these big events at that time anyway, where it was, every year was a great big massive invasion or a battle or something, so you're like, right, I have to up it and up it and up it and put more and more stuff in, which Point of No Return is guilty of entirely. Although, yeah, wait till you see Point of No Return, but there's a little bit more going on beneath the surface, I like to think. And this must have been, all the underwater sequences, the stuff where I've done masking, I think, is some of the earliest instances of masking I'd ever done. So trying to gain more complicated effects. And this is just, because at the time Star Wars, it was and still is the big thing that I at least collect in terms of Lego. So you just make do with what you have. It's the same with the white bricks. I remember distinctly, I ordered a whole bunch of white bricks on Pick-a-Brick back in the day, and I thought I was ordering light grey. So all the sets are white. Obviously done a bit more interestingly with the Gungonia Fortress set, because there's externals as well, but the internals are just a little bit shaky. But yeah, like it's interesting as well, kind of looking at this and sort of seeing how a younger person would interpret some Doctor Who, and it is obviously now you watch Doctor Who and you're kind of like, right, there's a little bit more going on beneath the surface there. There's actually quite a bit of depth, especially in the Peter Capaldi series, who I'm sure I've mentioned before is one of my favourite Doctors now. But as a younger person, you don't see that. You just see the flash and the action, and that's obviously reflected back in the stuff I made. That was quite interesting. Be interesting as well. I mean, I don't watch as much YouTube these days as I used to. I'm subscribed, I think, to a whole bunch of Lego Doctor Who creators, many of which are the age I was when I made this. To my shame, I've not really watched much of their stuff. But it'd be interesting to see if that's a similar sort of thing now. The Lego Doctor Who community, it's an interesting one. I think the Lego community generally, so what I'm going to talk about now is kind of like, it is an issue in, not an issue, it's an observation in the Lego Doctor Who community, but is also evident in the Lego brick film community at large. And the point I'm slowly arriving to is the nature of this as a hobby means it appeals more to younger people. And by that I mean simply, there seems to be a rotation when the current creators go to college, go to university, they ease off on the videos, they slowly fall out of love with the hobby, or no, I don't think it's that, actually. I don't think that's fair. I don't think people do fall out of love with the hobby. I think people find new interests, and I think work takes over a lot. It's not that they don't want to do Lego animation, 'cause it's certainly in my experience, I would love to do more of it. And every year at the start of the year, I'm like, right, these are all the videos I'm going to make, and invariably never make any of them. So I don't think it's a lack of motivation. It's a lack of time, it's a lack of resources, and you start thinking more and more about, well, I'm getting older, I have to start thinking about work, what I'm going to do. And so, as a community, the people in it rotate every few years. I would say, and you can feel free to disagree with this, it's just an observation of mine. I would say that I am of the second generation of Lego Doctor Who community. The first wave being, the people like Smith Movies Inc., Ben the Creator, Lisa is a Nut. Us, the second wave, obviously myself, Alex, LFP Animations, Matt Movies Inc. And I don't know if it's just that I'm not as present on YouTube as I once was, or what, but there doesn't seem to be an obvious third wave, which is a is slightly concerning, I guess, because it would be lovely for more people to come up. I've seen some younger people doing Lego Doctor Who stuff, but never anyone who kind of sticks with it. So I would urge you, make your own stuff. Definitely. If it's something that you've seen Lego Doctor Who YouTubers make before, and you're like, I would like to do that, then please do, because it's something that I've just not seen a third wave come up. Any obvious third wave, at least. And I think part of that is... Well, I don't know. It might be that it's just sort of flown under my radar, and if that's the case, that's entirely on me. But anyway, I should probably talk very briefly about the episode, about some of the stuff that's actually relevant to Point of No Return. Obviously, there were the 3 rings, which come into play in Series 2 as well. I don't know what they are, I don't know what they do. I know that the Doctor and Rassilon made them, which literally dawned on me 2 weeks ago, actually, because I was doing a bit of editing on Point of No Return, and I was thinking about it, and in my head, and I don't know if this is supported by canon or anything, but I just seem to recall thinking that Gallifrey in its entirety is time locked, and this might be a bit of headcanon here, but that you can't travel back in time on Gallifrey. That might be wrong, so that might be completely made up, but just that's what I thought, at least. And I realised, of course, the big resolution to Series 2 is that the Doctor travels back in time to the early days on Gallifrey, so that's maybe something I have to retcon as well. But I don't want to get too caught up in it, because it is Series 1, and I don't think very many people have seen it, so whatever. Anyway, here's an early plot point that I never did anything with, which is a bit of a shame. I think in retrospect maybe I could have done more with Seth as a character, but it's tricky to say, because originally I wanted to do a Series 3, and that would have been the time to do it. That was a plan I had when I was writing Series 2, was I distinctly remember this because I wrote down some ideas for episodes. I do Series 2, I do Series 3, and then I do Point of No Return. But it just, never happened. And I think if it had, it might have gone a different way. It might have been fleshed out more. Or alternatively, it might have just been more of the same, because, I was 13 or 14. So it's difficult to say. There's all these ifs and buts and maybes. But this is what it is. You kind of just have to treat it as that. Which is a bit of a shame, in one sense. Actually, no, it's not a shame. It's not a shame. It is what it is. I can't really add much more to that. And then the rings, just, my god, they're actually quite a cool design. I never collected the Atlantis sets; they were my brother's, and I think that's part of why I brought them back in Series 2. Is just for aesthetic reasons, because they look quite cool and they're an obvious MacGuffin. The obligatory every Doctor. I remember this quite distinctly, was when I was doing that sequence and making the minifigures for the Doctors. It was kind of like I had to make them distinctly the Doctor, but I couldn't just outright copy other people's designs on the internet. I've credited Matt, who's my brother, as terrorist, so that's nice and tasteful. Oh, and there's a end credit scene as well, which obviously sets up Series 2, and I guess to a lesser extent the Christmas special, which we're about to watch now, which is the last part of Series 1. I think I've been actually quite consistent in terms of just how how much I've been talking. I didn't think, I've not talked about the episodes themselves barely at all, but I think I've managed to actually keep up a monologue for quite a respectable amount of time, actually, given that I set out with no idea of what I was actually going to say. Again, this is, I think, quite a cool concept, is the idea that the Doctor would travel with some non-humans, and it would have been quite cool to extend it out for a few episodes. But again, this is a very kind of Moffat-y exchange, which is weird because in this series in particular, I emulated a lot of Series 5 and 6, which were the only ones out at that time, and Series 6 I think was only halfway out at that time. No, is that right? That can't be right. Anyway, and I remember I wasn't, and still am not, a huge fan of the earlier Moffat series, because I wasn't too keen on Matt Smith as the Doctor. But obviously it left some sort of impression on me, because Matt Smith was the Doctor in the first episode, and there's a lot of Moffatisms in this, in terms of the interplay between Seth and the Doctor. It's very Sherlocky. So, well, not very Sherlocky. Alex did a much better job of that in his series between the Doctor and Colin, and Matt as well, especially. Yeah, I think Alex got a lot of the dialogue and the conversational stuff right, and Matt got a lot of he also got that stuff right, but he got a lot of the bigger, grander plot elements in his series. And I've spoken about this before. I think part of that is, of course, the benefit of Matt's style is he can make a lot more stuff, and it's still really engaging. I wish I, could make as much. Then I'd maybe get half the ideas I have out in some capacity. But it is what it is. I do. That being said, and I do love Matt's style, but I enjoy the stop motion, I think, too much to do anything differently. And again, I know I'm quite apologetic, but I can't stress enough that's not a slight on Matt's style at all, or indeed anyone else who does that style of stills to tell the story, because you still tell the story. Obviously, the emphasis is a lot more on the writing, and you have to be good at it, which Matt is. But there's a certain charm about stop motion as a style that endears me to it, and is why I've done it for as long as I have, I guess. And as well, that I'm a big nerd and I love my Lego. And it's great, isn't it, when you're just about 20 and you're still asking for Lego sets for Christmas and what have you. It's definitely not strange. It's actually not, which is bloody weird. It's becoming more and more accepted, and I think that kind of goes for geek culture, if you want to call it that, generally. Like, take an obvious example of the Marvel films that will gross, billions of dollars. It's becoming much more mainstream now, and Lego as a hobby is kind of, to our generation, what model trains is for older generations. It's something a lot of people do, which is very surprising. It's a really big thing. I'm, very, very big tangent here. I'm living in York at the moment, and there's a dedicated Lego hobbyist shop. And I'm sure this is the same in plenty of other cities, but it was just interesting to me because and York isn't a big city, but I'm from the countryside. So it was interesting to me that that those kind of novelty hobbyist shops exist for what I thought was a bit more of a niche interest. But there we go. It's a big thing, like what these days. For I guess I know it's pretentious, but I guess adult collectors, if you want to call it that. Which I probably would call myself that, because I only ever buy stuff nowadays for stop motion and for display purposes. I'm not. That's kind of the main reason. But I really am running out of steam now. I think I've covered quite a lot there. I was planning on doing both Series 1 and 2 back to back, but I don't think I've got it in me. I think I've got to wait about like a week or so to record the next one. I'm recording this one end of January, just if you're interested. And at this point in time, Point of No Return is completely done, and I have the release date in mind, which will be the 23rd, which you guys will already know. But it's just a waiting game at this point, because I just want to allow enough time if something goes horribly, horribly wrong for me to identify any faults and smooth them out. And as well, I finished faster than I thought I would after Christmas. Which is, you know, I'll take the graces where I can get them. It's 5 years late, but I'll take it where I can get it. Man, I think this sequence is that wasn't bad as well. Where I was using and all the footage of the clouds there was my own footage that I did in time lapse. So there's a very, very handmade feel to it. You can kind of see the beginnings, I think, in this episode of some of the techniques that I would start to develop and use even today. And this must be one of the last videos I made using the UHD webcam, because Series 2 was obviously shot in the IPEVO point of view. Which is, if you are starting out, I would definitely recommend a webcam and frame capture software. It just makes it so much easier, and it's such a saving grace. I couldn't imagine doing it the old-fashioned way now. And there we go, setting up the master. And that's it for Series 1. As I say, I only kind of did this because the episodes don't exist on YouTube anymore. So it was just kind of a platform to put them on, I guess. And if you do want to watch the episodes properly without me yammering away in the background, the links to them all will be in the description. But that's it for now. I'll bid you adieu, and I'll see you tomorrow your time, for Series 2.